Every business tracks revenue, but very few truly control how that revenue turns into cash. Because while ERP systems can tell you what's been invoiced, they rarely tell you what's at risk, what's delayed, or where cash is quietly leaking across the receivables journey. Welcome back to the ERP Perspective, where we go beyond the surface of enterprise systems and explore how they really perform in the real world. I'm your host, George Collier, and today we're diving into one of the most overlooked but critical areas of any business: how revenue actually becomes cash. Because behind every invoice sits complexity, fragmented processes, global payments, customer risk, reconciliation gaps, and for many organizations, that complexity creates invisible leakage across the entire customer to cash journey. So the question is this a process problem or is it a system problem? Today, I'm joined by Or Kapelinsky, founder and CEO of Reevol, a company leading a new evolution in how global businesses manage receivables and revenue. Reevol is rethinking the entire customer to cash journey using an AI-powered agentic platform to bring intelligence to every step, from credit and risks through to payments, collections, reconciliation, and ultimately cash in the bank. In this episode, we're going to uncover where cash really leaks, why ERP doesn't surface it, and what changes when businesses stop treating receivables as a back office function and start managing it as a core driver of growth, risk, and performance. Or let's start here. Where is the biggest cash leak that most businesses don't even realize exists? Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the ERP Perspective.
Thank you, George. I'm very excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you guys on. I know we've been speaking for a good amount of time now about Reevol and your journey within the ERP industry. So I thought you'd be a great guest to have on the show to give the audience sort of a background of who Or Kapelinsky is, your journey throughout your career, and obviously up to present day with Reevol. I'd love for you to give that to the audience.
Thank you, George. So thank you for having me here in your great podcast. I'm really excited. So a little bit about me. I'm calling myself a payment plumber. Started my career in fintech on trading platforms, leading a big trading platform in Europe. And then I joined a very big Australian listed group where fintechs just arrived and Revolut awaked and regulation. So I led an e-money institution in Europe. And then I found out about harming of payments with banking, correspondent banking, SWIFT, merchant acquisition. And then it was a tremendous experience for me to lead establishing this type of company. I lived 7 years in Cyprus, and then I did this part of my life in Cyprus for 7 years. I came back to Israel 6 years ago. I was joking with my wife. So since we came back to Israel, we suffered COVID and a very problematic situation in our region, but we are okay. In Israel, I started my first startup named TenureX, which dealt with correspondent banking relationship. How we can solve the problem between two banks that need to serve other people's transfers or cross-border transfers. So this is what continuing my plumbing in payments and cross-border payments. This startup was selling to banks. It was very hard. You know it in ERP as an enterprise sales. I think your ecosystem understand how difficult it is to sell to enterprise, especially to banks. So I think that I learned a lot that in order to sell to enterprise and banks, you need a lot of background, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of resiliency. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to have this resiliency and had to close the startup. Mm-hmm. But I shifted into Amdocs, which is one of the biggest telco IT providers of the world, and led the Middle Eastern market for fintech and financial services. And another very interesting experience. And then joined Reevol 7 months ago as a co-founder and CEO, and actually continuing my B2B payments adventure. Again, trying to solve a very clear problem of the world is how a business can pay other business in a different country. This is more or less my journey until now.
That's great to hear. I mean, just to quickly touch on that point, I mean, working with banks, it's quite hard, it's quite a regulated industry. But to have a business, that maybe wasn't successful and then move on to another one, I see that as a plus. I think business owners who have that resilience and experience what, maybe a business closure looks like and then starting again, I think so important. I mean, I've had a software development consultancy a couple of years ago, and that was the same. But I think the best business owners understand the processes, have gone through that experience, because if you've never gone through it, how can you prepare for that? How can you learn about going through them experiences?
Definitely. And this is why I love Reevol. Because our customers are small, medium-sized businesses, and you are also leading a small-sized business, and eventually these businesses are the engine of the world. The enterprise will be there, and they will stay, but the engine, the pie, will grow as these small, medium-sized businesses will be better, will do better business. And this is what thrills me in Reevol, because we are dealing with small-sized businesses and with owners. Owners of businesses that are always debating what should I do next in order to grow my business, what I need to do better, and how can I stop thinking about handling the fires in my business and starting to think more strategically about how to increase revenue. So this is why I love what we are doing now.
Fantastic. I mean, the topic today, where cash leaks in your receivables journey and how to fix it. From working at Reevol and the customers that you work with, why did you want to talk about that topic today?
Because this is what we do for a living. And let's start with philosophy a little bit and how fintech evolved. I think this is a very important part of your audience, which are also ERPs, right? Which are also SIs and implementers of ERPs and ERPs themselves. What I saw in the last 15 years of my fintech journey is that ERPs and the fintech revolution were very focused on spend, on account payables. You see very, very, very successful companies in this area developed. Ramp, Brex, that just was bought by Capital One, Tipalti, Mesh, and also the ERPs themselves are focused on payables and spend. How do I help my businesses, my CFO, to be more efficient? How do I run better policies and workflows on spend? How do I control my payments, right? If you think about it carefully, no one until now thought about how can I do the same for receivables, which are actually the most important part of a business. How do I create revenues? How do I generate more revenues? And we decided to focus on this critical problem of receivables, of revenue. And when we investigated this unit in the business, we understood that it's mainly the fact that all business owners, even enterprises, even ERPs, they see receivables as a cost unit in their business. I know that every invoice I generate of $100 or pound, I know I take it as part of doing business. Around 10 pounds or 10% or 5% will go into cost of payments, cost of accountants, cost of write-offs, cost of delays, but we claim that it shouldn't be that way. Receivables should become a profit center.
I mean, to summarize what Reevol are bringing to the industry, you're essentially helping global businesses eliminate that cash leakage by transforming, fragmented ERP-driven receivables into intelligent end-to-end revenue engines, essentially.
Exactly. What we offer is we look at receivable as a full journey, which we determined it's a new lingo that we are bringing to the world. It's our challenge to bring a new term, right? It's always a challenge of a startup. We're bringing a new term, customer to cash. ERP world knows order to cash or invoice to cash. We claim if you want to transform receivables into a revenue center, you need to go one step to the left, to the customer to cash. So we actually decided to go all in one, or end to end. From the moment a new customer or a new buyer is knocking at your door, we are bringing you what we call the buyer intelligence. We tell you who is your buyer. Should you give them or grant them net terms? How do you manage the credit? How do you connect them to trade insurance? How do you control this risk? But then it's also connected to all the other units of the journey, which is account receivables, the reminders, the collections, the payments, the reconciliation, and eventually receivable insights, which are naturally connected into the buyer intelligence again. Because today, when you have Gen AI and you have AI, This is the technical revolution that enable us even to determine that we can transform this business, right? The fact that all the units are remembering, they have a contextual reminders, and they can nurture each other, can create what we call the revenue evolution, compounding intelligence that can nurture eventually the revenue cycle.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, most ERP systems can tell you obviously what's been invoiced, but not what's at risk. Where do you see the biggest invisible cash leaks across the receivables journey, and that ERP simply doesn't surface?
Great question. Thank you for that. You see, when we are partnering with ERPs, and again, all of them, every type of ERP has the same strength, the different strengths, but most of them, 100%, are missing two areas of cash leakage, or actually areas where they can generate their customer more revenues. The first unit is obviously the buyer intelligent. ERPs by nature are more close to the banks, to the end of the journey, where eventually a CFO needs to report to tax, right? Or to generate financial reports, or to reconcile and pay VAT. So I'm adding a new buyer, and I'm opening a new account, right, in my ERP. This, at the moment, for most of the ERPs, is just an administrative task. I have a new name, but it doesn't have the substance and the credit management of who is this customer and what should I do with them. Most ERPs left this into the CRMs, by the way, and also to outsource to other tools, fragmented tools like Experian and data providers and trade insurance. So this is the first place where ERPs naturally didn't touch, but eventually it's connected to the customer, to the invoice. This is the first unit. The second unit, which is very interesting, is that most of ERPs claim that they have integrated payments, right? But when we speak with the ERPs and we deeply understand what is their payment offering, most of them, first and foremost, integrated cards and B2C or B2C payments, like simple payments, and neglected the B2B, which are heavy lifting payments. I think there is a huge difference between claiming that you are integrating payments than embedding payments into your workflow. Because when you embed payments into your workflow, you understand that, especially in B2B payments, it's not only the payment, just the amount, right? Yeah. Going into the bank. In B2B payments, you have a lot of workflows that needs to support this amount. It's the reconciliation, it's handling the request for information for the bank, it's managing the risk of the bank. This is where you have the leakage. First and foremost, you have a leakage because you don't know who are your buyers. So you're having write-offs. We calculated 6% of write-offs. 6% of of invoices are write-off because of just simply mispricing the risk. But worse is that many good buyers are not receiving enough net terms. They are not receiving enough trust from the sellers. So they are going and going to competition. And the other unit is obviously between 2 to 4% of every invoice is being leaked from the B2B payment workflows. Not only the simple payment fees of cross-border payments, but the amount of time that is involved in reconciliation, calling with your banks, your accountant chasing, who is the buyer, who paid me because I received the slip. The buyer in my bank account is X, but my customer name is XYZ. So all of this is a tremendous leakage of cash.
100%. I mean, if a business is doing 10 million euros and losing 4% just on that's 400,000 euros just gone.
Exactly. And you invest so much in ERPs, right? You invest so much resources. I listen to your podcast, and there is one determined thing that is repeated in ERP's implementation. It's not only the technology. It's not only the amount you invest in choosing the
Yeah, I was going to ask you during ERP implementations, where do the early design decisions around obviously credit, billing, and payments unintentionally create that long term sort of cash leakage? So I was going to say the stats that you mentioned previously there regarding 2 to 4% just on the invoice side. Is there? I'm sure you have an article or more information. I'll obviously link that below because it's so interesting. Any CIO or CFO even watching this and think are we wasting potentially up to 4% of invoice receivables there? But I'll make sure obviously to link that below. But for global businesses, especially exporters, which I know you work with a lot, where does complexity in payments, currencies, and obviously customer risk create the biggest breakdowns in order to cash? Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. I mean, I fully identify with that. I mean, the ERP Perspective is obviously a business that I run, but we have another business called Global Transformation Partners, and we deal with global businesses, with contractors especially, and we have to pay them contractors and obviously invoice the client. And we're working with people in the US, we're working with people in Europe, and 100% that cash flow is so essential to one, having enough cash in the business to pay the contractors working on Oracle, SAP projects, Info projects. It's an essential because obviously if a lot of businesses I think fail as well because of that cash flow. They have a lot of outgoings and the receivables aren't transferred quick enough, or there's that much leakage. Yeah, 100%. I mean, we work with European customers, US customers, and you're totally right. The bank details needed for one of our customers to pay on the recruitment side or the consultant side, there's a different IBAN number, there's a different documentation. So even when we started Colleague Global Transformation Partners, we were seeing that difficulty of a client saying, well, I want to pay you, but it's messy. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've got a US registered bank account, we've got a European bank account, so we've got those details. But it's very hard for an invoice, and you've got to include all that at the bottom. And then if you use somewhere like Stripe, for example, the payment fees are massive. If you're invoicing for someone, 50,000 euros or 50,000 US dollars, the fees on that could be thousands. On the reconciliation side, I mean, reconciliation is often where everything slows down, cash is in, but the clarity isn't. Why is reconciliation still such a persistent blind spot in modern ERP environments? Hmm. 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 100%. I mean, what actually changes when businesses stop treating receivables as a back office process and start managing it as a performance lever, tied to obviously the revenue risk and the growth of the business? Mm. 100%. I think doing that minimizes the risk, maximizes the growth, maximizes the revenue. But I think quite a lot of people in finance or in terms in general, we've all seen in payment terms and things like that. And the majority of the time, the only terms are, oh, if it's late, you've got a late payment fee. There isn't much about reward. If you've got a customer and they're paying on time, they're paying early, how can we make that a more enjoyable process, but also, reward that customer, or say, we like this. It's always, let's punish you for paying late. There's never sort of terms about, right. Yeah. Yeah. I think we need to reward good behavior instead of just, right, it's always, let's punish the bad behavior. But if, like you said, if a CFO can see this data and say, look, this customer's, they've paid early for the last 6 months, how can we make this a more enjoyable but easier process for them to work with us, and reward that. Mhm. 100%. It's not a long-term fix. It's just, trying to fix a short-term gap, but you're not fixing the longevity of the business, or helping them for grow for the revenue. So 100% agree with you. I mean, do you believe ERP was, ever designed to optimize cash flow, or is it fundamentally limited to, to recording it? And if so, what needs to sit around the ERP system? 100%. I mean, from your perspective, or if most organizations were forced to quantify how much cash they're actually losing across their receivables journey today, do you think they'd be surprised? And what would that realization change for them? Mhm. Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think it might take a lot of humility, though, for a CFO to come to you and say, look, let's do this, because they might be fearful and say, if you find out that we've got 5% of leakage, does that look bad on me? Does that look bad on on my position? So I think it takes a lot of humility. What's best for the business. Yeah, 100%. I think that's what takes a good CFO who can take that responsibility and say, look, let's take action on this instead of ignoring it. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I am the CFO in this case. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the ERP perspective today and giving such good insight. I'll link obviously your profile below this video on all of our social media channels, so LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, also TikTok. We're posting videos there as well to reach everybody in the industry. Is there anything else that you'd like to give to the audience, or any final messages you'd like to share before we wrap up this episode? Great message. Great message. Thank you so much all for coming on to the ERP perspective, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon.